Congressman Chip Roy joins us now by phone. He represents the 21st Congressional District of Texas. Chip, welcome back to the program.
Tony, glad to be on as always. Thanks for your focus on this issue. There's very few things that are as important as this right now in the world for our consideration and conversation in the United States, but also around the globe.
Well, let me jump right into that, Chip, because we don't have a lot of time. But why should Christians in the United States be concerned about this case out of Finland?
Well, because, when you see this occurring in Europe, when you see this occurring around the world, it is not long before it's occurring here. And in fact, it's already occurring here, just not quite as openly and obviously, right, with an open prosecution of someone saying this. But when you're talking about cancel culture, when you're talking about where we're headed in our schools and our society, what you're seeing in Finland is a glimpse into the future for our country. And more importantly, we have a duty to stand up for religious liberty and stand up for people to be able to speak the truth around the world, whether it was that young man in front of the tank in Tiananmen Square or whether it's these two individuals in particular facing this, absurd prosecution in Finland for daring just to speak their faith, the truth of man and woman and their belief about marriage. So that I think is why Americans should care.
One thing that sets us apart from many of these European countries, most or all European countries, and even Canada, is our First Amendment freedom that we have. But going back to my conversation with Paul Coleman, part of the issue is self-censoring, that people just don't want the hassle. They don't want to face the cancel culture, so they go silent. We do that, we lose our First Amendment freedom.
Well, I'm glad you noted that. For now, the First Amendment protects us largely from prosecution for this sort of thing. But it doesn't really fully prevent us from persecution and being ostracized and alienated and canceled. We're seeing it every day, right? We're seeing even in our most conservative parts of the country, you're seeing our kids being afraid to speak up. I mean, a recent survey, Tony, at the University of Virginia said that only 4% of the students were willing to speak up against the faculty on, quote, controversial topics, okay? This would be one of those controversial topics, of course. So that's what's happening in our society. And don't think for a minute that prosecution for these kinds of things under the guise of hate crimes won't eventually be allowed, and leftist judges will say, like this prosecutor is arguing, that there are, quote, boundaries to free speech and boundaries to free expression and boundaries to freedom of religion. There really should not be within, reasonable limits, obviously, of fire in a theater and those kinds of things.
So the way that we protect that fundamental freedom that has distinguished America and made us really the beacon of freedom around the globe is to use that freedom and use it with responsibility, as you pointed out, but to use it without regard to what the cancel culture says or what the political winds may be blowing, which direction they may be blowing. We need to speak truth, and we need to speak it boldly.
Look, if we cannot right now, in a society that's supposed to be the land of the free, in the United States of America, if we can't stand up in defense of ourselves and our brothers and sisters around the world and talk about, in Western civilization, talk about marriage, talk about man and woman, then what can we say? I mean, if you take that away, what's left, right? Because that's the basics of who we are. When you look at a little kid, and a little 2-year-old is asking when they see a mommy, where's the daddy? And they get these things because of course they do. Human nature, of course they see it. And we're being told by the intellectual elite, so to speak, that we have to bow down to their will at a world that they have imagined and created. That undermines the very existence of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that the Declaration stood for and that the Bill of Rights echoes and enforces. So I would just tell you that there is nothing more important than standing up for this around the world as both a predictor of what we need to be defending in our own country, but also to stand in solidarity with people around the world so that they know that we will stand alongside of them, that they should speak out so that our freedoms are protected around the world.
Well, and Congressman Chip Roy, we appreciate the fact that you're doing that on Capitol Hill and elsewhere.